Don Mazzella here again for Small Business Digest. And in our surveys, small businesses are still reluctant to go to the cloud. But what we have with us today, what I anticipate will be somebody that will make us feel a little bit more comfortable about it. Paul Melchiorre is with us. He's with his guy, and he's got a book. But before we do anything else, we ask him his personal background and about his book and his company. Paul, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Don. It's a pleasure to be here. I spent the majority of my life in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, an Eagles fan, but I do my best there, and just got back from Arizona. It's not a pretty sight, but we're trying to get over it. And I spent a majority of my time there, but I did do a few tours of duty in California, being in the technology business, grew companies like Anaplan, Ariba, SAP in the early days. So I've been through these migrations of technology from mainframe to client server to the cloud, and as we move into AI and the next generation of technology. So really been in technology my entire life. I have 4 children, spent a lot of my time in Florida, especially in the rough weather, but I'm joining you today from our New York office at Stripes, which is where I'm working now. It's a private equity venture growth firm in the city here, and we've done great investments in a lot of technology companies, a lot of cloud-based companies, and AI companies as well. So it's a pleasure to be here with you, Don.
Okay. So you have a book. So tell us about the book.
Yeah, my co-author and I, during the, little break that we had a few years back prior to COVID, he's been bugging me to write all this stuff down. And I'm a little old school, Don, maybe like you. I write everything in a book. I mean, I have computers and iPads and iPhones, but I go into a meeting, I write everything into a notebook. And I've had these notebooks for 30 some odd years, and I've collected them all just in case, and a lot of times to go back to something I've forgotten. So Mark convinced me to go through my notebooks over the years and kind of then just jot down things that I thought would be applicable, in today's, environment to sell in today's environment to companies, and as they move to this migration to the next generation of technology in the cloud. And that's kind of the way it worked out. We put this book together, and we figured what better way to take these 37 years of experiences and put it into a book that owners of businesses, CEOs, sales reps, whoever can read, and it's a quick, easy read. And then we got a dozen what we called titans. So those titans were people who had been in the industry maybe even longer than myself, had CEO and heads of sales roles, built companies, and we interviewed them for each of the chapters, which I thought was a different perspective. I always like to get other people's perspective. So it talks about, things like, grit and persistence and resilience, things that, make small business owners, entrepreneurs, successful sales professionals really different. And I really felt that we tried to put together, a playbook for success as companies move into this new technology world. And, how do you sell to, whether it's small, medium, or large companies, it really doesn't matter. So these were just some of the tenets of how you migrate to these new technologies, how you help customers along that migration to the cloud. And as a small business owner, how do you hire maybe the right go-to-market executives to help really grow your business? And we think we've put together,
Paul, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you. What's the name of the book, and do you have it with you?
I'm sorry, it's Selling the Cloud. we came up with we took about 6 months to figure out a title, and we all along it was titled Selling the Cloud, and then we came up with all these different potential titles. You know how that works, and then we reverted back. Well, what are we going to name the book? Why don't we just name it Selling the Cloud? And that's how the title came about. And it's available at bookstores, Amazon, all that. But not really here to plug the book, but it's great reading for, I'm sure, all of your listeners.
Well, Why don't you plug the book? Because, uh, but Paul, let's back up a minute. In our surveys, small business say they're afraid to go to the cloud for well, they have reasons. But my question to you first is should a small business be in the cloud? And if so, what are some of the safeguards they should be doing to ensure that they're safe, and more importantly, when a salesman comes knocking, what should be asking?
Yeah, that's a great question, Don. And I think it's not just small businesses that have this hesitancy of migrating to new technologies. It's large enterprises as well. And I think the first thing is you have to realize as technology shifts, you don't want to be the first in, right? And experiment and pioneer, but you also don't want to be a laggard. And I think today it's very safe to say that I believe that the cloud is actually more secure, safer, and more productive than keeping these environments in-house, right? Or outsourcing it to a managed service provider who doesn't have that cloud-based technology that provides embedded levels of security, the things that you need to get started to make sure you're operating. So when the folks that come in to try to force you into making this migration, I think it's important to ask a few questions. One, what other companies in my business or in my industry have made this migration? Number two, what are the true costs? I think people don't realize, they think, oh, they look at the initial cost, well, that bill seems to be a lot lower. But then there's always a series of hidden costs or additional costs that you need to identify, because it's not just like you're outsourcing this function to the cloud, this mysterious cloud computer, but you're outsourcing functions that you think you might not have as much control over. But in reality, if you go to the right, cloud providers, you do the right things, you ask the right questions, it actually provides more security, more flexibility, and should be at a lower cost. I think if you're not thinking about those transitions to these technologies, you could be left behind. And I think we see a lot of small businesses, because they don't have the expertise, they don't know what questions they ask. They realize that they're probably, hesitant to migrate to these technologies. And then I think they find themselves behind. And what I mean by that is, as these technologies evolve, the older versions, wind up not being compatible. I'll give you a real life example. I was, down in Florida with a couple of my friends, and my friend is a, old school contractor, owns a small business, and he's got an iPhone. I don't even know what the number was. It was an old one. And he says he can't get the NHL app. He can't get this. He can't get that. And I said to him, I said, well, John, how long have you had your phone? Oh, well, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9 years. Well, if you have a bottle of wine 7 or 8 or 9 years, it's probably good wine. If you have an iPhone for 8 years, it probably needs to be replaced. So, moral of the story is you need to make this migration as a small business to the cloud, because it's already migrating and moving ahead. And there's next generations of technologies around, AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning that only will be accessible through at least having a base of cloud-based technology.
That's a good answer, but a lot of small businesses are afraid of technology, and they're afraid of being, as you say, obsolete. But they're also afraid of being too far ahead. How does one, well, and let's look at it from the salesman point of view, selling this. How does he or she say to a small business to overcome these fears?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another great question, Don. I think, each business is different, obviously, in their evolution, in the resources that they have or don't have. And that's why these managed service providers, who now do provide some cloud-based technologies, could be very good support for small businesses that aren't very technical, don't have technical support, but need to be running on the latest technology for their, just their business. So I think there are alternatives to what I'll call outsource the technology without having to hire resources. Although I think once you get to some level of critical mass as a small business, I strongly recommend to those businesses to bring in technology support. Now, in a lot of ways, it could be the next generation that's looking to take over the business, right? I know a lot of small businesses, they try to pass the business down to their families, and typically that younger generation, not like you and I, but the younger generation is much more technology savvy, is more accustomed to using technology, is not afraid of technology, and therefore they can come in and actually bring that expertise into the business and help make that migration. And if you don't have that family member, then there's managed service providers, or hiring a technical resource. I know small businesses are running on really tight margins. They don't see technology as an investment, in like inventory or hiring extra salespeople or opening up a new factory or plant. But you almost have to view it as a necessity. It's the ante to get into the game today. It's all about technology. And I think small businesses that don't embrace it, and I'm not talking about embracing the pioneering technologies, but embracing the technologies that are out there, like cloud, that have been proven for years. You got to take the leap, if you will. And whether it's through a provider or hiring, hopefully a family member to come in and be that expert, or going and getting that expert in-house. Because if you don't, you're probably it's going to be a harder road to make that conversion. And you're going to be so far behind, you're going to miss business opportunities.
Well, let me ask you this question. How does one go about demonstrating the cost effectiveness of some migration?
Yeah, that's a challenge, because depending on your current infrastructure, think of it as like, so for my friend who's got the iPhone 6, it's pretty easy to take that data and put it on an iPhone 14 or whatever the latest number is. Well, if you have an old system that's been in place running your distribution business or your manufacturing business for 10, 15 years, which is kind of the average age of a lot of the enterprise integration systems that are in place, and now you have to migrate that over, it's not something that typically happens over weekend or so, because that's why a lot of companies are fearful of that migration. It takes time, it takes effort, and there's probably costs associated with it. So the questions that I would ask is to ensure that as you're talking to providers, people are trying to sell you in this, movement to the cloud, ask, what is the level of data that I need to provide? Do I have all the data in my existing systems, or is it sitting in spreadsheets, or people's notebooks, or old guys like me's head? So if that's the case, your migration is going to be a little tougher, to be able to do that. So I think making sure you understand the migration costs, in addition to even getting the technology moved, the challenge then becomes, I used to call it change management. If you've been working on a system for 10 or 15 years, and now all of a sudden a new technology comes out, and it's slick, it's fast, it's easier to use technically. But if I've been accustomed to doing my job a certain way for 10 or 15 years on an old computer, and now I'm into this newer technology, it's change. Some people don't like change. Young people, old people don't like change. So don't underestimate the personal aspect of those changes. They may not show up on a spreadsheet of the cost, but there is a cost associated with that transition, not only of the technology, but of the people that need to learn the new technology. So the change management aspects, the relearning, the disruption of people's everyday life when they move to new technologies, just plan for more cost and more time. It's like building a house. You go to your contractor. Oh, it's going to cost you X. Well, it's going to cost you 2X, and it's going to take you twice as long, to get in the house. No changes there.
You had anticipated my next question, but before we go further, the name of your book and where people can get it.
Yeah, thank you, Don. It's Selling the Cloud. Easiest place to get it is Amazon, and you can get the either the paperback version or the Audible version, which is fantastic. I know I didn't do the voice because of my poor grammar from South Philadelphia, but we had a wonderful lady with an amazing accent that I was like, wow, that's my book. I didn't even, but the Audible version's great. Listen to it in the car or whatever on your iPhone. or Android, or you can go to the bookstores, primarily, Borders and others, that you can get the hardback version of it. But quickest way is go to Amazon. You can have the audio thing downloaded, probably before we hang up.
Well, question: did you use an English language, someone from with an English accent?
You know, I thought she had an English accent, but she just actually spoke proper English, unlike ourselves, right?
Here, South Philadelphia and Newark aren't that far apart.
Uh,
That's where
there you
I
go.
grew up.
That's true. We don't speak the Queen's English, that's for sure.
But you bring up an interesting point. We talk about change and how people do not like it. Well, an older person, but it's interesting what they're running into today is even the young people seem to favor one thing over another, and you can't get them to change.
It's true. And I'm not a psychologist by any means. I know it's hard for people like you and I to, to change, because we've been kind of ingrained in these habits for, 60 years or whatever. But I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old daughter, and I have some older children as well. But I see even these generations that are coming out now. I mean, there's, the pace and things are so different. They're so much smarter than we were, but they are hesitant to change. And now once they make the change, they're a lot better at us, in adjusting to it. But they're just as reluctant as we would be in making a change, whether it's, to a new technology or to a new routine or a new school or anything like that. So I think that's just part of human nature, is that we're, against change. But look, if you don't change, especially in your small business, you have to always be reinventing yourself. And you think about what COVID and the impact that had on small businesses. And I just watched, living in Philadelphia, the restaurateurs that, like, within a day or two, even though it wasn't illegal, they started opening outdoor eateries, right? And the ones that did it quick and got in and didn't hesitate, they made that change. They changed the way they operated. Those restaurants survived, right? And there's so many of those lessons just for small businesses, whether it's, a restaurant, technology, a factory. It really doesn't matter. You've got to continue to think about how you reinvent yourself. And regardless of how long you've been in business, you just think about the Fortune 500 companies now versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago. I mean, companies like GE and, Woolworth and all these companies I grew up with, some of them are not even business, and most of them are out of the, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and it's being replaced by Tesla and Google and Facebook and all the next generation of, whether it's technology or whatever. So, as a small business owner, own a couple car washes down in the Atlantic City area that I've had for 15 years. Fortunately, I have a great partner who runs them day to day. And we've had to make changes over, those time periods to keep these businesses running. So I kind of have you know, an affinity for what it takes to be an entrepreneur and a small businesses. And even in technology, started a lot of these companies, work with a lot of, early stage small businesses. And, it's not easy. It's not easy to be in business today. And I don't think it's going to be any easier in the future.
Well, I'm going to ask you this question: what makes a good salesperson for selling data or selling
Yeah.
products like?
If you go through the book, and I'll let the readers and viewers go through, but I always looked at what is it that makes salespeople consistently good, right? Because
Mhm.
regardless of what you're selling, right? So technology has got its nuances, but whether you're selling money or, you're managing money or selling insurance or, selling, widgets, whatever, it doesn't really matter. There's things that I feel make salespeople great versus good. I think first off, you have to have that grit, right? I mean, I think it's hard. Selling is a hard profession. It's not a 9 to 5 job. If you look at it as a 9 to 5 job, you're probably not a great salesperson. Secondarily, I think you have to have a passion for the profession, right? I mean, if you figure you spend a third of your life working, a third of your life sleeping, whatever else you do with the third of your life, you better buy a very good mattress and love your job. right? You'll be very happy if you do those two things. And I think if you love selling and you love the job, I just love traveling around the world and meeting all these people and helping customers, right? I think at the end of the day, when you're selling, and what makes a good salesperson, they're not selling just to, make an improvement for themselves financially. Of course, you got to make a living, but the great salespeople sell customers, they sell people, and those people are doing better with whatever you're selling them. You're actually able then to sell them when they go to the next company or when they go somewhere else. They're the best referrals. So you build that trust. And I talk about trust-based relationships in the book, and how do you build that trust, in the customer, to where that customer is looking to you not as a salesperson to, peddle you something, but to really help your business. And those tend to be the best salespeople. And I do have to say, having three daughters, I'm not objective, but chapter 5, we talk about the women in sales. I just think having empathy and being able to multitask and listen well, things that, let's face it, women do a lot better than we do. Not, and my last job, the top 6 people in the company, the top 6 sales reps were all women. And I never forget, the number 7 guy calls me up. He says, "Hey, Paul, did I win the car?" Because I always used to give a Porsche away. And I said, "Tom," I said, you didn't win the Porsche." He says, "Why not? I'm the top rep." I said, "Yeah, you're the top male rep. There's 5 ladies ahead of you." I totally, that always felt bad for that, but the reality is, so chapter 5 is a good one there. And for all the ladies listening, you already know you're better at selling than we are. The rest of the world just needs to figure it out.
I should say we don't have the time on for Paul. What your book again? And one last thought. What would you like to leave our audience?
Yeah, the book is Selling the Cloud. Best way to get it is on Amazon. And I just, for all the small businesses and all the people in the selling profession out there, we're blessed. We're blessed to have a small business here in America. It's a great country. It's the lifeline of the economy. We're competing against the biggest companies in the world. And if you're in the selling end of the business, it's you have control of your destiny. You really do. And even if you don't own a business and you're in sales, you own your own territory. You own your own business. And just when you wake up every day, thank the Lord that you have this opportunity in this great country to be in this profession, to own a small business, to be an entrepreneur. We really are lucky to be in the position that we're in. So thank you, Don.
Okay, hold on.